Thank you. So I will be presenting on or facilitating this session on advocacy journalism for policy change and impact. Please, at any point in my presentation, if you have a question or a comment, it's okay to type the question and comment so that we can address it as we move along. Or you could also wait till after the presentation. We will have time for questions and feedback. Or you can also draw our attention by raising your hand if you like to speak directly. So I would like to start with some quotes that I find very interesting about journalism. So the first is from Julian Assange, who is a whistleblower who must be known to everyone in this field. And he says that if journalism is good, it is controversial by its nature. If journalism is good, it is controversial by its nature. In this presentation, I will be sharing, some controversial ideas, not because I want to be controversial, but it's just the nature of the field. And the second one is from Tom Stoppard, who is a Czech British citizen, and he's also a playwright. He says, I still believe that if your aim is to change the world, journalism is a more immediate short-term weapon. So that is a big vote for journalism and its ability to change the world, perhaps beginning with changing policies, which is what we intend to focus on in today's presentation. So my presentation is structured as follows. I will begin by trying to define advocacy journalism. In fact, I dedicate a lot of time and effort to defining advocacy journalism because it's an interesting strand or special area in journalism. Then I also talk about why advocacy journalism matters or why it's important. Then to the meat of the presentation, which is the techniques for advocacy journalism. We'll try to enhance our understanding by looking at two case studies on advocacy journalism in Ghana. For starters, I would like to, remind us of the meaning of the word advocacy, just the word advocacy. And here I tend to the dictionary, which gives the plainest of meanings. Textbooks can complicate things, but the dictionary just states it as simply as it can be said. So the word advocacy means public support or recommendation for a particular cause or policy. Let's take note of public support for a particular cause or policy. But it is also very familiar with those who work in the legal field because barristers, lawyers, they do a lot of advocacy in the court. They represent their clients and they advocate on their behalf. They plead for their causes. And they do not plead just because they want to talk about the good things their clients have done or can do. They are pleading to win. Okay, so we are not just publicly supporting a cause, but it should lead to some impact or some of the advocacy. So now, in terms of defining advocacy journalism, I'm sure this might be a bit familiar with a lot of us already on the call, but it also argues for a specific cause. It actively argues or supports a specific cause, policies, or issues. This is interesting because as journalists, we often would like to share or spread, disseminate carefully selected information and hope that our audiences or targets will take it from there. Advocacy journalism is different. It takes a side. It's on the side of the issues that it supports, the causes that it supports. And the background or the fundamental idea behind advocacy journalism. By the way, let me say that advocacy journalism is a specialized field. Previously we used to think of the journalism field as, being one open family where we all practice and people could be put on different beats, and you can even switch beats from politics to sports. But now we are increasingly seeing specialization where people might identify as investigative journalists, and that is solely what they do. They specialize and do great at that. Others are sports journalists, some are business journalists, and they focus on those special or niche areas. Their whole beat is centered on that. So advocacy journalism is also a special branch of journalism. It's a specialization. It's a unique, sub-discipline in the journalism field, right? And the fundamental idea behind this is that journalists operate in the public realm through the mass media. And because of this, they can purposefully and openly represent particular points of view in their work. We do public service as journalists, right? But with the advocacy philosophy, beyond the public service, we can take side and focus on particular issues because of the change we want to cause in those areas. Because of the results we want to see in those areas, we can select and focus on those issues and then advocate, like lawyers, plead for changes or canvass for support for changes in those areas. So this has more to do with an ethos that sees journalism as a way to advance an agenda upfront, an agenda of upfront vested interest. So the advocate journalist has an interest, and the interest in causing change in a particular causes that we plead is not openly neutral, just putting the facts or the information out there and expect that others will pick it from there and move on. The advocate journalist takes a point of view, and that point of view is to plead for change or canvass for support to lead to some effect in the areas that you are supporting. Right. So based on this, will you say advocacy is journalism? What do you think? I'd like to pause here for comments or views about this. My dear audience on the call, police, what do you think? Is advocacy journalism? If it is about taking sides and pleading particular causes for results, how does that sit with you? Is it journalism? Think you can type your responses or raise your hand. You'll be given a chance to speak. I'm asking this because in the field, there are arguments that, if journalists are supposed to be neutral and objective, but they are taking sides as advocacy journalists, then what does that make journalism? Is it still journalism, or advocacy journalism is something entirely different? Okay, I'm seeing some comments here. Journalists set agenda, so in doing advocacy, they set the public agenda. All right. So which means that advocacy is implied in journalistic work. I appreciate that, Caroline. All right, but there are some strong arguments against advocacy journalism, and it's only fair that we raise these, at the start of the presentation and address them, since we are going to focus on the field of advocacy journalism. So some argue that the central purpose of journalism is to inform in the public interest, is to inform, just, disseminate the information, just transmit the factual information in the interest of the public. But it is rather public relations, right? That does advocacy in the interest of clients. So if journalists are advocating for particular causes, Are they becoming public relations people, or are they still serving the general public interest? There are also others who see advocacy journalism as being a subjective form of reporting, because advocacy journalists take sides. And this side could be, political, it could be environmental, it could be social, but they take sides. Another argument is that advocacy journalists have an agenda, and often this could be their personal agenda or their group agenda and not the public agenda. So because of all of these, is advocacy journalism journalism, right? To answer my own question, I'll say yes. It is. Yes, done right. Done right, it is a professional practice. Okay, so done right, advocacy journalism is a professional practice. And as I've already indicated, it's a specialized field of journalism. So advocacy journalism has more to do with the ethos, okay? The ethics of journalism that has an interest in advancing the public agenda with vested interest, right? But advocacy journalists must report accurately and meet professional standards of fairness and truthfulness. Because you are taking the side of the environment and promoting environmental interests, or you are taking the side of farmers and promoting farmers' interests, does not mean, right, that you can sidestep the rules of professional practice, such as making sure the information you share is factual, such as making sure that you are objective in your process, right? So advocacy journalism is good practice, but it must be done right. It must still follow the standards of fairness and truthfulness, which guides journalism practice. So where can we practice advocacy journalism? Will that be on radio, television broadcast? Will that be, through newspapers, print media, or is solely digital? Advocacy journalism can be practiced anywhere, okay, on all the various types of media, whether it is newspaper or online or on radio or on television. And journalists who are advocates can also work in any discipline. There are some that focus on politics, advocate for political causes. It could be for the rights of some people to vote, or for the rights of some people to participate more fully in the political process, right? It could also be on the environment. It could also be on the environment. And I'll share a case study of an environmental journalist who uses his work to advocate, right? Then also farming. Oh, sorry about that. It's not famine, it's farming, right? So advocacy journalists can also, advocate for, more or better policies in the agricultural sphere. It could be about cashew crops, it could be about cocoa, but some advocacy journalists focus their work on agriculture, about farming practices that are more sustainable. We see a lot of advocacy journalism also in the area of health and then human rights, right? Labor, international trade, any social issue. All of these are areas that advocacy journalists can focus on, and many of them have already been doing this. All right. So while advocacy journalism is open and transparent, it's important to know that already as journalists, it doesn't matter whether you practice in sports, or you do politics, or you focus on social issues. Subtly, we all do some kind of advocacy. More subtle or hidden elements of advocacy can appear as a result of our intrinsically selective norms. Okay, every day we select news bulletins based on what we think is important. And as we do that, we are advocating for particular causes. Even in the selection of stories that should be aired or broadcast at prime time. If you select educational stories, if you select sanitation stories, decide to spend 5 or 7 minutes on them, definitely you are supporting those causes. So intrinsic in journalistic routines and practices is already advocacy. So we are already in the work of advocacy, but what we have to do is to, focus and specialize and try and do it better. Here I'm sharing some political examples from Ghana, right? In the just ended elections in 2024, just last year, right? The the vice president who contested as the presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party said that the opposition's control, okay, of major media houses gave them an edge in the 2024 polls. That was what the presidential candidate of the NPP said. And when I heard this, I smiled because not too long ago, his opponent, who was then the president, okay, now president because he won last year, also said something similar. And he said the media cabal was blocking his transformation message. Tacit in all of this is that when the governments are in power, practices, the media houses are advocating for the causes of their opponents, right? Government accountable. So it might seem as their opponents, right? But this just shows that implicit in our journalistic routines, built in how we go about our activities, we end up showing support for issues that we believe in. So advocacy is something that journalists cannot shy away from at all. It's all about doing it better and specializing in how we do it for the impact that we want. So I move on. So why does advocacy journalism matter? Why at all does advocacy journalism matter? And I like to start with an example. In 2023, Ghana finally ratified the Work in Fishing Convention. And this gives the opportunity to fishers to demand better, services from their employers. This also gives the room to shine, more light on the plight of fisher folk. And this example is interesting because look at when the convention was promulgated in 2007, and it was in 2017, right, that other countries started ratifying this convention. But I had to take a lot of advocacy, a lot of talk in the background, including the work of media people, for Ghana to finally ratify this convention in 2003, in 2023, right? And this is advocacy achieving results. This is advocacy achieving results on behalf of a group of people, okay, fisher folk. And these are some of the reasons why advocacy matters. There are a lot of things going on. So if we do not decide to focus on specific causes and shine light on them persistently over time, we might, lose out. Right. So advocacy journalism gives voice to the marginalized. The marginalized could be fisher folks, it could be women groups, it could be ethnic minorities, it could be gender minorities, it could be farmers, but advocacy journalism can give them a voice because it gives them the opportunity to be heard, gives them the opportunity to be heard. Then advocacy journalism also promotes policy changes and drives reforms. Ghana's ratification of the Work in Fishing Convention is one example of that. Through consistent advocacy over time, through the work of people in the media and other society organizations, it's led to some reform, which is the final ratification of the convention, which means that more resources and attention will now be given to the promotion of fishers' rights. Right. It's also a way of holding the powerful accountable is Manasseh articulately in shining light. Advocacy journalism can also be used to stand against corruption, stand against abuse, right? We can advocate for causes and then achieve results in these areas. Sometimes the powerful are not necessarily the politicians. They could also be big businesses that are taking workers' rights for granted, or big businesses that take up negative work practices. But through advocacy journalism, we can shine light on these issues and can hold them accountable, leading to change in these areas. Finally, it also encourages civic engagement and public discourse. Through our work as advocacy journalists, we bring up different issues, and some of them, right, might have even been lost in the national conversations. So when we bring them up that way, it encourages civic engagement and public discourse, which is necessary in a policy change. It helps to, drive a coalition around particular causes, and then gradually this can lead to changes in those areas. Okay, do we have any questions? Occasionally, I like to check the chat box for questions. Okay. Okay, so I do not have any direct questions, so I will proceed. Right. Okay. So if you joined late or if you just joined, I'd like to remind you that today's discussion is on advocacy journalism for policy change and impact. How can we organize ourselves and stand as journalists in support of particular causes that we believe in, and then direct our efforts towards causing changes or having impact in those areas? That is what we are discussing today. And right now, what we've got into is the techniques for effective advocacy journalism. Many of us on the call are already practicing journalists, so I do not intend to preach about how we should go about our jobs. But just for emphasis, because we want to achieve, change, impact through our work, it's important that we take note of these effective techniques. Storytelling with emotional impact. You see, while it will not be easy to appeal to people's reasoning all the time, right? Because we are all human beings, there is a part of us that responds quickly, and that is our emotions. Okay, so telling stories with emotions, giving real life human examples, telling stories from the perspectives of those affected by those stories, right? All of these are ways of getting into people's heads through their hearts. Okay, you tell the story generally, but for an emotional impact. And an example of that would be taking the viewpoint of those who are affected by the issues, whether it's environmental degradation or it is, abuse of workers' rights or negative farming practices. When these stories are told from the human perspective, it evokes a human or emotional response. And that way you can get the attention of your target. This is very important because people are getting used to the new style. They're getting used to the everyday information about the economy, about education, about politics, and everything, being difficult, right? So people listen to the news, but not paying attention. And some of them have particular things that they look out for. So if what is of concern to you, what you want to advocate, is not in an area of interest to them, you will hardly get their attention. And these might be the people who will start or push the conversations that will lead to the policy changes. Okay, so it's important to take the interesting emotional point of view some of the time to gain people's attention. Right. I'm not suggesting that all advocacy stories should aim only for emotional impact. But what I'm saying is it's an interesting way of getting people's attention. So although your story might have different dimensions, it's important to also take the human view of it. the emotional aspect of it, not just the numbers and then the hard statistics. Let us know how this affects real human beings by taking their points of view. Right. Secondly, it's important to use data and research to support our claims. This is very important because we are in an era where people are manipulating information to their ends. We are in an era where even when you show the truth, people say, oh, this is the alternative truth. So the only way of convincing policymakers, the only way of convincing those who have the ability to, in the end, push or support us in the causes that we advocate for is to rely on data. Is to rely on data from credible sources, okay? Data from credible sources, and if possible, data from multiple sources, okay? Because sometimes a single source of data might not tell the full story. But when you rely on multiple sources of credible data, that gives your story a concrete background. Because mind you, you are pushing for change. Okay, you are like a lawyer advocating or pleading someone's case in a court. So it's important that you organize yourself well and have all the data and information that you need to be able to push, the case to the other side to have the change that you want. So researching and then using data is very, very important. Also because sometimes some people will want the status quo to remain. In fact, the status quo might be what it is because somebody is benefiting from it. So they are more than happy to counter. They are more than happy to take any shortfalls or weaknesses in your case to be the reason why people should ignore you. So it's important to strengthen your case and the cause you are building by relying on data, and then research to support your claims. All right. The third one is that it's important for us to use multimedia tools. The field of mass media and communication has changed significantly. Now, we must all learn to use digital tools for our work, whether you work in the print media or the broadcast media. In Ghana, for example, lots of the broadcast media organizations are now doing simulcasting. They are simultaneously broadcasting on like YouTube, on Facebook, and then on radio and television. Okay, so this is a typical example of media convergence. And we as individual journalists must also begin to take advantage of these technologies. Okay, so it's not enough to share your advocacy stories as feature articles in print media. No, you should have podcasts about them. You should have podcasts about them. You might not have to start your own podcast, but you can, and use that to advocate for your cause. Okay, you are pleading for. When people send some, emotional effect and evoke some response from them, then social media is an important tool, both your personal social media and that of your organization. All of these platforms should be used to push out messages of advocacy. Right. Then it's important for us to collaborate with advocacy groups and NGOs. Nobody can win the advocacy fight alone, whether as an individual or as an organization. So it's good. In fact, it's essential to identify individuals and groups who are already working in the space or who are interested in working in the space, and then you collaborate with them to have a stronger effect. This is significant because while you might have the skill in researching and writing articles, there might be people who might also be volunteering their time to share with you the legal dimension of the issues you are pleading for, okay? And others who have the benefit of the network to get you to more collaborative and reliable sources that will give you the information and data you need for further advocacy. So it is necessary for us not to work in silos, but identify NGOs and other groups who see things the way you see them, and then engage them, work together to plead your cases for the change that we so desire. This is very, very important. All right. Then finally, I'd like to emphasize the use of multiple platforms for impact. Use of multiple platforms for impact. Uh, uh, this is partly because of how fragmented the media industry has become. Okay, even if you work with the biggest broadcast media in your country, not all the policymakers, not all the citizens will avail themselves for television and then radio. Some of them still rely on print, some just digital. So it's important to combine these platforms for maximum impact. And sometimes too, let's get out of our comfort zones and get involved in, giving speeches at places, get involved in, panel work at these discussions, because you may not know who is listening. Okay, so it's important to combine multiple platforms for maximum impact. Okay, so now I will like to share some case studies. Those in Ghana might be familiar with the gentleman in our short, but for the sake of our friends joining us from other countries, what we have in our short to the left is Mr. Erastus Asaridonko, who is an environmental journalist with Multimedia Group, and then the former president, Nana Akufo-Addo. Right, the president, was awarding him, which is quite interesting. But a lot of Mr. Erastus Asaridonko's work has been in the fight against galamsey, or illegal gold mining in Ghana. This is a problem that has plagued Ghana and other, African countries in which there is a small scale mining, but ours has been very challenging because through galamsey activities, the environment is being degraded, livelihoods are being lost. And I'm sharing this case study because of how consistent, okay, Erastus has been in his work. He has been constantly producing content about galamsey. And in doing his work, he uses hard data or science. Through his work, he explains how galamsey or illegal gold mining activities are related to defective beds. And he links this to research from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Just an example of how he is collaborating with scientists in the field to show how this challenge of galamsey is affecting us. He also collaborates with others to try and explain how galamsey work is making our fish stock unsafe, because some chemicals through the galamsey work are deposited in the head of fish in water bodies, and this can affect us. In fact, that alarmed everyone because no one is very sure or certain of where their fish is coming from. So through his work, he's using science to alert us of the challenge, but also draw attention that anyone could be affected of this by this. He moved on to even explain how galamsey activities are affecting the production of cocoa. And cocoa is Ghana's largest export crop. It supports our economy significantly. So if cocoa production is being affected, then that means that the whole economy is being affected. So this is a good example of how he is pleading his case by explaining scientifically through hard data, okay, how the problem is having far-reaching effects on various sectors of the economy. Another thing we can learn about Erastus Asaridonko is his use of multimedia. He does report for his media house's online platform. He also does documentaries. Sometimes it's not enough to write, one article or a few articles. It's good to also try to, bring in some motion picture, have documentaries about the story, have, radio features about the story. And he combines all of these to bring about the change that he and others, including myself. In fact, I think every Ghanaian will support a fight against illegal mining. Although we cannot speak of a total ban of illegal mining right now as we speak, one of the results of his work and that of the media coalition against Galamsey, broadly, is that the current president has promised that they will ban the issuance of leases for mining in all forest reserves. Well, this is just a beginning, but we hope that through the consistency of his work, we will begin to see even more results. Right. So it's just an instance of how we can go about our advocacy journalistic work and how this can bring about change in our countries. Another case study, which will be very familiar with people practicing in Ghana, perhaps in other parts of West Africa, is Mr. Manasseh Azuri Awini. Right. He stands against corruption and then oppression. And consistently, he has been producing content that sheds light on corruption in the public sector. There is a tall list of stories that he has brought up, many of them investigative pieces that have exposed corruption in the public sector. To give just a few examples, he brought up the Ford Gift saga. He brought up Zoom Lions underpayment of street sweepers, contract for sale. Also, he highlighted corruption at the Ghana Youth Employment and Entrepreneurial Development Agency, GIDA, in Ghana. And some of his stories have led to convictions. Some of his stories have led to the introduction of reforms in our public sector. But he's not giving up. He is still going. He's still going, right? And that is consistency. You see, advocacy journalism is not a field that we can do touch and go. We can't just raise the stories and forget about them, hoping that someone heard us and will do something about it. No, it should be consistent over time until we have the desired results that we want. And to be frank, the results will not come in the next day or in the next year. Sometimes it takes years, okay, to consistently keep pushing, to now have a coalition around the issue and push further until we have had the results that we want. Manasseh uses hard data. He uses hard data and evidence. In fact, that's the only way that your stories can lead to convictions. Because when you are in the courtroom, it is based on arguments that you plead your case. So he makes use of hard data and then evidence in his stories. And he's also one person who makes interesting use of multimedia. What we are seeing is a screen grab from his personal website. So he has a personal website, and the story there this morning is this anti-corruption video, why the Auditor General says Zoom Lion is in inverted commerce, in quotation, a fraudulent company. And this is a case that he has been pushing for a long time, and he's not giving up because he's not seeing results. Right. Besides having a personal website, he also uses his social media to consistently advocate for causes that he believes in, and many of them are around corruption. All right. Manasseh also gets involved in public engagements. In my university, he's been invited to give talks on public service, journalism, corruption. Manasseh has also been invited to the University of Ghana, to speak there. And he makes use of these opportunities to also get citizens to see the importance of what he's doing and the need for us all to coalesce around that cause. Okay, so he makes use of, he's one person who makes effective use of public engagement, including lectures, right? And he also collaborates strongly with stakeholders, sometimes with with the police, sometimes with the auditor general, sometimes with universities. He collaborates with stakeholders to be able to achieve the results that he wants. So these are two good examples of how we can go about advocacy journalism. Okay, so getting started. How do we get started? Perhaps you were not considering yourself an advocacy journalist, but now you are nursing the desire to be an advocacy journalist. How do we start? So the first is to identify a pressing social issue, which could be in any field. It could be in any field. It could be in of this presentation. I'm sure Gilbert and my friends will be very happy if your advocacy journalism is in the area of agriculture, promote and the kind in the sub-region. But after identifying pressing social issue, it's important to conduct in-depth research. You see, arguing your case in the public is not easy. There will be counter arguments, there will be counter views. And the only way you convince the public to see your point of view and support your cause is when you present more convincing facts. And to do this, you need to conduct in-depth research. You need to conduct in-depth research. Advocacy journalism stories are not the kind that are produced, in one night or in one day's work. These takes time, taking information from different sources and then, serializing them or continuously writing about those particular issues. So identify pressing social issue and then conduct, in-depth research about these issues. Okay. You may not necessarily have to go onto the field to be, interviewing people. It depends on the kind of issue you are trying to plead. Sometimes you can rely on secondary data, which might be already available at your country's statistical service or municipal authority or, some other areas. You can also rely on secondary or already available data to plead your cause. So far as that secondary data is reliable, that is another challenge. You don't want to use data or information that will be counted. It should be reliable. Then build network, okay? Build network with civil society organization, build network with other journalists, build network with media houses, okay? Other policymakers who are interested in that area. There might be some who should be interested but might not be immediately interested. You should still get close to them because through your work, you could, focus on their interest in those areas, and then they will begin to see the issues from your point of view. Right. After you have done this, please, it is time for you to get your first advocacy report published or aired, depending on the platform. Right. I do not foresee the difficulty in publishing or airing an advocacy report in a media house. But if there is, you always will have your personal platform. Okay, I want to believe most of us are on social media. So far as that is not against company policy, you can share some of these stories out there. You can work with other local international media houses who are interested in stories like this. In fact, there are some NGOs who are funding. There are some NGOs who are funding for stories in particular areas. So you can identify those who are interested in those areas, work with them. If you are eligible for some of those funds, assess it. Use that to conduct more research, build your case, and then share your story. But the work of advocacy journalism, it just begins with your first story. We need to, push more, put in more effort to be able to get the results that we desire from our advocacy journalism work. Right. So we are gradually getting to the end of the presentation. This is about my last slide. So here I talk about the challenges, okay, the potential challenges. As I said in the introduction, Advocacy journalism is a specialized area. But beyond that, there are also arguments against the practice of advocacy in journalism. Some see it as more of public relations than objective journalism. So we should expect challenges like this. And I'm bringing up these challenges so that we can prepare for them in advance and prepare responses to those who will try to, question our journalistic standards because we are practicing advocacy journalism. So the first is the perception of bias. Okay, so people will question, why are you constantly, seeing the issues just from the perspective of the farmers? Why are you not trying to consider what the government is also doing, even if it is small, right? There will always be that perception of bias, and you will have to find a way of responding to that beforehand. Then also there's a potential of legal and political risks. The status quo remains as is because some people are benefiting from it. And sometimes those benefiting are the elite in society, or they are the powerful in society. And your work might try to expose them, so you might face legal and political risks. So you will have to be aware of this, and then also beforehand think about how you will navigate some of those challenges. For example, both Erastus Asaredonko and Manasseh Azori have had to leave the country at some point because they felt they were unsafe. And this is just because of the work that they do, the advocacy work that they do, right? I mean, who would have thought that advocating for sustainable environmental practices or an end to galamsey would be so risky that at some point you have to flee the country for safety. But yes, that's the way it is. So we have to be aware of these potential dangers. Then navigating censorship and then press freedom issues. Some of the media houses we work with, some of the people we work with as our bosses, some of them have, their own biases and preferences. So it's not all the time that they'll be happy with your advocacy stories about cashew farmers, about cocoa farmers in Africa. So you have to find a way of navigating that so that, they do not water down your story so much that it doesn't get the kind of impact that it will, that you wanted it to have. And sometimes this includes engaging the said editor, or the said producer beforehand to explain the issues to them for them to see how important this is, right? Then you should ensure that you always have a fact-based approach. We should ensure that you always have a fact-based approach. If you are advocating for a cause publicly using information, but you are not doing that in a journalistic style, that cannot be called advocacy journalism. So regardless of how important the cause is, we must always plead those causes or canvas for support for them using facts, using hard unimpeachable facts, because you do not want to be pointed for more practice when you are advocating for change. That way, your whole effort will fall flat because they found a weakness in your case. So please let us rely on facts. And these facts can be accessed from secondary sources, some local, some international. We can work with civil society organizations to identify or find these facts to back the causes that we plead. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation on advocacy journalism for policy change and impact. I welcome questions, comments, and feedback. So that just means let's have an open discussion now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that wonderful presentation. Whilst we are waiting for colleagues to raise their hand if they have any question, I think there were some few more of what some are comments, but I think they still want your response to that. So Vincent said, may I be correctly informed? Here in Kenya, you stand a risk of being branded names if you do advocate, for example, a political agenda of a particular political divide. I don't know how I can advocate for a political agenda without being branded as supporting a political cause. And then I think Caroline, yes, indicated that, yes, consistency, but what about the risk of reader fatigue? So, Stephen, if you can respond to these, and then whilst I go through to see if there is a hand that has been raised, and then we would unmute
Okay.
that person to ask the question. So, colleagues, you
All right.
either raise your
So,
hand or you type your question in the chat box. Stephen, over to
okay.
you.
So Vincent, yes, please. Thank you very much, Gilbert. Yeah, so I'll take the first one, which is being branded, as supporting one political party or the other. So yes, yes, yes. Let's all expect that. Okay, the field is controversial by nature. The field is controversial by nature. There is no way you can advocate for a cause and not be branded by it. In fact, we should expect it. We should expect it. But as you are doing all of these, please ensure that the process that you follow in doing your advocacy work, whether it is political or social, the process is transparent. The process is objective. The process, stands in line with journalistic norms. Okay, because people will be calling you names, and sometimes they do this quote unquote naming and shaming to get you to drop the cause that you are pleading for, right? But just like a lawyer stands boldly in the courtroom to plead cases on behalf of their clients proudly until they win those cases, we must also do same. We must also do same, because this is not a job for the light-hearted. In fact, name calling is just the least of challenges, right? Sometimes there are even risks involved, and it could even border on the safety of journalists. So while we are doing all of these, let's also try to keep these risks in mind. Okay. Thanks for that. The second question is about fatigue. It's about fatigue. Yes, yes, I expect that too. You see, when you are getting fatigued, it means that you are just at the point where you be getting results. In Ghana's mining, look, there has been a whole media coalition against Erasmus, as Aridonko has not stopped. So at the point you feel fatigue, I've been going for a long time and I'll get the result. After all, the darker the night, the closer the dawn, right? So let's maintain, let's keep going. Because if you get fatigued and you stopped, yes, you've exerted effort, maybe money and time, but what have you gained? Nothing. Perhaps you're able to network and get wow, maybe over time, you get the results that we desire. Yes, please. So let's be consistent and commit to the long term. The long term. Yeah. Thanks for that question too.
Yes, Stephen, and then there is one from Lucy. Lucy say, I think there is a very thin line between advocacy and PR and sustainability, especially if you depend on the masses to buy your product. I guess it's both pro. I guess it has both pros and cons. Just like during election seasons, when a media house is seen to be leaning towards a certain party or ideals of a party, then they have to face the consequences in terms of readership and viewership, leading to dwindling profits.
Yo, yes, please. So I get that thin line. Thank you very much, Lucy. But I will argue that as journalists, despite taking sides of issues, we are still in the service of the public. whereas public relations professionals are in the service of their clients who pay them. Okay, so our job is public service, but because of our conviction for particular causes, we take a stand. And that might be for a certain ethnic minority, that might be for a particular social cause, we take a stand. But while we do all of this, our interest is the larger public. Okay, our interest is the larger public. And we use or we still rely on the journalistic norms, such as objectivity, fairness, transparency, and the kind. And I know it's a bit debatable, but when I talk about objectivity here, I'm referring to the objectivity of the process. Okay, because you have taken a point here, you, the individual, are no longer trying to be objective, but the process that you follow in making sure you turn your information into news or your documentary and the rest, that should be objective. When you decide to go for data, you do not go for a certain data only because it supports your cause, even though the researcher was not forthright in coming up with that data. No. That's not what we are preaching. Still advocacy, but let's follow the process rightly so that nobody will see a weakness in our courses and then use that to perhaps dismantle all what we have built. So yeah, let's be guided.
Okay, colleagues, we have the next 5 minutes to wrap up. So if you have any question,
Okay.
kindly raise your hand or type it in the chat box, and then our resource person will respond to it accordingly. Okay, Stephen, I think maybe you can give us your closing
Yes, please.
remarks on your presentation, and then we'll call it a day.
All right. So thank you all very much. Today we looked at advocacy journalism, broadly, which is a kind of journalism, a special practice of journalism that pleads for particular causes in the hope that it will lead to change. Right. In conclusion, what I would say is that advocacy journalism is a rewarding practice. It's a rewarding practice, despite being challenging. But we can get our results through tactful efforts and consistency. I wish us all the best on our advocacy journalism and on our advocacy journalism journey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. We are grateful to have you. So, colleagues, thank you for joining. And then next week on the 12th of February, we have our next presentation on the role of research and credible and analytical reporting. And we will be expecting to see you and our other colleagues joining to learn and to build our capacity. So from here in Ghana, I think there's a message in the chat box. Okay, so it's Lucy thanking us for the session. Yes, we are grateful to have you. And we are looking forward to see all of you and other colleagues next week. So it's bye from here.